and meeting is called to order at 7:16.
Thank you.
And once Joe connects up with audio,
there we go.
welcome, Joe. So excellent.
Hello.
We now
Sorry,
have a
Mike.
quorum. So thank you for joining. And just to catch you up, while we didn't have quorum, I was just going over the recommendations from Attorney Bobrowski, which the 20-second version is to figure out a strategy for how we want to go forward in approaching getting feedback from other boards, getting feedback from the community, and how things should be presented going forward. And this is draft 2 is really the first consolidated draft, so we can really start to get feedback. So that's the 20-second version with that. But now that we have a quorum, thank you for joining. If any members of the public, aka Attorney McGrail, wish to present anything at this time, certainly welcome to do so. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, we've got the minutes from our last meeting. This was April 16th, 2024. These are available in Dropbox for the members. These were created, I believe, by Lucy. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented? They have the required information of when it was called to order, who was there, members who were there, also as non-members, and it presented the information by roll call and short description of everything that happened. Motion.
Second.
Okay, so motion made by Joe, seconded by Anne, and Anne gets to record all of this. Any discussion?
Dan, can you please remind me what date those minutes are from?
These are the minutes from April 16th, 2024.
Thank you.
The only minor change that's administrative is just to state that the meeting itself was held by Zoom.
Sure.
Otherwise, with approval, I'll go ahead and add that information in, and then just add in the footer, which I add to all approved minutes with the approval date. We have a motion made and seconded. Any comments? None seen. With that, we will go ahead and take a roll call vote in the order in which you appear on my screen. So Anne.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Catherine.
I'm going to vote present.
So an abstention. Joe.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So it passes 4-0 with one abstention. Excellent. So minutes are taken care of. I will go ahead for finalize those, send those off to the town clerk and to the town administrator's office for posting onto the website so that we're consistent with the best practices and the bylaws of the town. So item number 4, the outcomes of the April 29th town meeting. So I'm not sure if everyone had the wherewithal to attend both sessions of town meeting. It was a most interesting town meeting. There was a lot of discussion on it and a variety of topics is a polite way of putting it. And after on the second night, on the first night, almost everything was approved with a few notable exceptions. And then for items that weren't the proponent wasn't there for. On second night, first couple items were approved, and then everything was rejected summarily after that, was the short version of it. The first item that came up in the town meeting, for those of you who were there, was the after the budget, was the MBTA communities by communities zoning plans and bylaws. There were 3 different proposals presented, 2 by the planning board and then 1 by citizen petition. All 3 were defeated summarily. And the take that I took from those who were voting against it it came largely down to a spite vote. People did not got the sense that they did not like that there was a sense that feedback was not received by the planning board in as much of a way that they felt it should be, that they didn't feel heard. And as a result, they did not want to approve anything. There's also certainly some people in town who were very vocal about not wanting to accept any MBTA communities bylaw because they didn't like the impacts that it may have by the fact that the state was mandating that there be a change. So that was my take on the MBTA communities piece to it. And the lesson that I took from that is that, which I think we can apply here, is we want to be as open and transparent about this process and accept feedback. Doesn't mean that things will necessarily change, but to have people really feel welcome, to give feedback and to feel heard, to really feel as if the feedback is being accepted, I think becomes really significant. So that was my take on that aspect.
I would underscore though, Dan, to also be very clear that accepting feedback but disagreeing with it ultimately does not mean you are not being transparent. And those
Agreed.
get conflated constantly.
The lack of transparency, I think, was less on incorporating feedback and more on the substitute minimum compliant map that was presented basically on the floor,
Yeah.
which I will say as a member of the planning board was not necessarily driven by the planning board, but other town officials.
We mentioned the whole adding a second map, and I remember saying this is probably not going to be a good idea. And that I think once the second map showed up, people would just, that was the end of that. That's how I took it when that second map showed up.
I think the second
That wasn't necessarily us or any, but that was obviously that was a thrown up, like Kevin just said, it was thrown up there last minute. So
I think Councillor Dombrowski's map would have passed had it not been for, I think there were spite votes against all of them because people didn't feel like there was transparency into that map.
I personally, I tend to agree with that. I think if people knew that there was going to be a second map by the planning board, I think that it would have been much better received. It was the fact that it felt like a switch. People were really surprised by it, that there was no advance notice that, oh, the planning board has another map and they may present it and this is where it is. It without it being readily available, people just felt like, okay, that's too much change without going through things. And I think we have a different situation where we're not actually proposing any map changes whatsoever here. This is just language. But there's a lot to the language. The language and the words tend to drive most of the actual decision making, more so than maps by themselves. So I think that, to Ann's point, receiving feedback does not mean that we necessarily have to make changes, but people, I think, have to feel as if it's heard. And I think part of that is engaging with people, that to make sure that we understand why they're making decisions, why they're making their feedback. And once people feel heard, even if there's a disagreement and they may ultimately vote against the recodification, they will at least feel as if, okay, their input was heard and considered. So I think that that's just a different part of the process. And I think that it's something that the intentions by all who presented the MBTA communities, I think, were good in the end. I think that it came down to really members of the community didn't feel as if the feedback was heard, and because they didn't have that dialogue. It was really one way, talking at people one way or the other. So people were had the opportunity to present, but there wasn't much dialogue with people. And I think that that's a significant difference in how these meetings tend to be run. I think that when we hold public hearings, to have people interact, I think becomes really beneficial. As Attorney McGrail knows, we are open to feedback. As other people have interacted with us, we are open to feedback. And there have been quite a few people who have emailed the committee and wanting to know when certain things will be discussed. I tell them when those topics come up so that they can join the meetings if they express interest in a particular aspect. So the idea that people can feel as if they're a part of a decision-making body, I think makes a big part of these components, because as much as they are logical, as much as they are financial, the actual votes often become emotional. And that drives a lot of election components, and town meeting is in a lot of ways still a form of an election. At least that's my 2 cents on it. So I think that there are some things we can do for learning. There is also going to be my understanding is that there's going to be another MBTA communities bylaw proposed for the fall. And there's certainly sufficient time to have that process go through. And it only requires a majority, and people are at least more familiar with the issue. I think that it will be in a better situation than what we saw this spring. So that's my 2 cents on that. Other thoughts on the MBTA communities and lessons for our committee as a result?
I would say one lesson, presenting something is political, and you have to know your audience, and you have to be a bit of, you have to understand how it will be received. So I think it's very strategic in picking who presents. And Dan, you presented in the past, you've done such a great job on these, so I don't think I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be you. My vote is Dan presents, but I think it's different being in a small committee than standing up in front of the full town. And we have seen some really good things go down because of how something was presented when it was completely legitimate. I think of parking. So I still have picks over that. But I do think that makes a difference, knowing that it's very different presenting a town meeting.
I tend to agree with that.
A dry run or a conversation with the town moderator before town meeting would also be helpful, I would say.
Anyone can do that. Absolutely. If you have something big, he's willing to chat with you. He's willing to discuss things. Yeah, 100%.
And for what it's worth, along those lines, the last 2 articles at this last town meeting, which were political articles that had to do with international affairs, I wound up making a motion for indefinite postponement on those on article, I think it was 22, which was the first of those articles. I did notify in advance the town moderator that was my intent. So the idea of having communication, in open communication, I second that. The town moderator doesn't want there to be surprises. Effectively, the less surprises we have, the better. And I think that tends to work well. I think that where Mr. McGrail is with us, his presentation, there were no real surprises in it. And as part of that, I think it was fairly well received. So that was among the things. And Brian, if you have anything you'd like to add to that, you've presented things that have passed, and you've presented things that haven't over the years. If you've got any wise words for us, certainly we're open to them.
Wise words or wise guy words?
Either.
Yeah, whoever presents has to wear a Kevlar suit. Just let everything flow off and take your hits. No, I agree with everything that was said. Just,
The meeting.
I think everyone is
Long
spot on.
meeting. It's only
Do.
7, 9 people.
Excellent. And so the other big topic that did come up and the town meeting spent considerable amount of time on that is also built into the draft 2 was the topic of marijuana. And there were 2 articles on marijuana. They both were defeated. And that's something that we may want to determine how we want to address it. We can also continue to exclude it based upon the town meeting sentiment, or we can choose to address it one way or another. The current draft does have language in there. I believe there is going to be additional language because of some things that have come out fairly recently by the CCC as to language that has to be in for anything that has to do with allowing marijuana establishments. So that's one of the decisions I'm not expecting us to have an answer tonight for, but that's something to think about. One thought that I've had is that the marijuana uses may be appropriate to combine in location, style, and sectionality in the zoning with adult uses, because they are both isolated to those who are 21 and older. So different than alcohol consumption, which is independently licensed and is done at an independent retail establishment that can also sell other goods, typically lottery tickets and other pieces. Marijuana is not allowed to permit people under 21 even into the establishment. So it's a slightly different way approach to different things. I'm just presenting that as something to think about. I'm not expecting that we'll make any sort of formal decisions on it, but should we want to make a decision at some point over the course of the next few months, that's some options that we may have. So that's things, and it's also a topic that I think getting feedback from the community will be very helpful for, so we can get direction. Kevin.
We may also want to talk with the Board of Public Health and the Town Council to see what their thinking is, because it seemed like for that particular article, the Board of Public Health not supporting it swayed a lot of people. But also let those groups know, based on what Attorney Bobrowski has told us right now, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So we need to come up with something.
Agreed. And that's where, again, where I think we have the opportunity before us to determine, and really the goal for tonight is to figure out what should our strategies and approaches be as we bring more and more people from the public into this process, so that we can get feedback, get opinions, and get additional information. The contract we have with Attorney Bobrowski allows him to join us for public hearings and other information that's outside of the normal scope of just a pure recodification. We actually built that in. It's part of our budget. It's part of our agreement. So, and he's fine with joining in. So we have the ability to have him join in on several of those information sessions. And I think that this is type of information for him to give the feedback of, okay, yes, to use your terminology, Kevin, the wild, wild west, I think is very appropriate. And so we can also get feedback from other boards, from members of the public. What is the sentiment on it? Because I'm quite confident it can be written in, or it can be written out if the sentiment is strong one way or the other. The general approach that most of the recodification has been doing is to allow for flexibility when it is needed by the appointed board. And some of that is obviously subject to change, where we are splitting, but in the current recodification, splitting a lot of the responsibilities from the ZBA to both the ZBA and planning board. And that way final decisions become part of ZBA, but for components that the planning board's more appropriate, it actually relieves the ZBA from having to review those particular items. So I think that's a great example of where, yes, we want to let people know this is a change and let people know earlier rather than later, so that if they say, yeah, we're not ready for this, let's pull it out. Okay, we can pull it out, and then it can be inserted at a later date, or perhaps it gets put in without any additional componentry, or gets put in some sort of minor way. So there's lots of different approaches that can be taken. Others' thoughts on that issue, because that was the other big issue that came up at the town meeting.
I think we want to have all our ducks in a row. The Macaulay kept talking about the music school. He's dead wrong on the law, and I was just too exhausted to stand up and argue with him. The music school is not a school, will never be a school for purposes of a dispensary or anything having to do with marijuana. It's classic K through 12 private or public school. So it's what every person with common sense understands a school to be. So that is one example of, we just want to make sure, in Kevin's point of view, like going to Board of Health, Town Council, what can people attack, and to be ready when they are factually wrong, to explain nicely why they're wrong. I couldn't do that at the meeting either. That's why I didn't stand up.
And fortunately, we'll have Attorney Bobrowski to be the one to stand up for that. And he is the authority. He's the one who wrote the book literally on these pieces.
Well, I prosecuted these cases too, so I know what a school is defined with drugs. So, but again, I was just very tired. And I saw how the vote was going, so I knew it didn't matter.
So other thoughts on that? So with that, amongst the biggest differences in the recodification, and again, draft 2 is public, it's out there so that people can see what is available. All of the files are posted, so both the coded version and the clean version, so people can depending upon their perspective, can see how they want to see the changes. If they want to see it in context of what's different, what's not, that's available. If they just want to see what would it look like if it were to be approved, that's there too. Nothing has been approved as of now, so it is all available. Amongst the items that Attorney Bobrowski did recommend very specifically is that we find a time, probably towards the end of June, that we can have effectively a public meeting and set it up probably as more of a hearing style to get feedback and invite all of the other boards so that we can really go over some of the different items, but to do it before the end of June so that it's done within the fiscal year, more importantly, before people tend to take off for the summer. So wasn't sure people's thoughts on that. If that is something that you'd be open for, we could get a quorum to a meeting for that. I'm seeing some head nods, and
The last week in June, I cannot do the week of the 17th.
nor can I. So yes, I'm looking at the week of the 24th. So any preferences for that week, or if people know that there's particularly bad days? There's no holidays that I'm aware of offhand that are occurring that week.
Which week is it? I'm sorry, Dan, which week is this? June?
June 24th.
Oh, the last week in June. That week's open for me. I'm good.
It looks okay for me too.
Me too.
I'm free except Wednesday that week.
And in terms of people to alert, it would, my initial thinking, please suggest additional people. I've got ZBA, Planning Board, Board of Health, the town planner. I know she's started the economic development, Aaron Kokinda. I believe we're going to be assigned a new town council liaison. Bob Vincent has rolled off of that. We'll let them, the town council obviously know as well. Anyone else that you can think of from a town perspective, we'll make sure that Attorney McGrail has no idea when this is. Just kidding.
Someone please, chief or his designee.
Okay. Any others? Anyone else that you can think of that's particularly concerned about land usage? Thinking we'll also make sure, in addition to the ZBA, make sure the building inspector knows if Benjamin wants to join. Obviously, he may want to receive feedback. He may just want to wait for the decisions to be made too.
Yeah, and I was thinking just not of the whole draft. So Chief Scory doesn't need to be there for everything. I think when the marijuana one comes up, we should notify him. So sorry, I was being on the last topic.
Okay.
What about the Conservation Commission?
Probably a good idea to include them as well, because they certainly are a part of land use. We could contact the schools and school committee, because obviously if there's changes, it could impact school usage, although I'm not sure that they are going to be as concerned about the land usage outside of their facilities. They tend to be more long-term reactive than anything else, as it relates to change in the town. It would be longer-term demographics. Others' thoughts? Otherwise, as you know, people in the town who may be interested, once we have a date for it, it will be posted. The intent will be to post it as early as possible. And for that particular meeting, ideally, I'd like to see if we can do it as a hybrid meeting where there's an in-person component as well. I'll talk to the town administrator so that people, regardless of their technical abilities, have the ability to join in and give feedback in whatever way makes sense for them. Some people are more comfortable with technology than others. And I think that it's important to allow people to give feedback whatever ways they can. That will probably move the meeting itself. It may be in town hall, it may be in the public safety building. Attorney McGrail.
Just a note for you, Mr. Chair, that that week of June, the planning board meets Tuesday night and the zoning board meets Wednesday night. Just for your planning purposes.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I think the town council's may meet that Monday night as well, because they typically meet the second, fourth Monday. So, but I'm not sure if they're planning on having that meeting in June or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. Sometimes they skip that end of June meeting. So we can check.
So I'll coordinate with that. Otherwise, it may happen on the 27th, which is the Thursday evening. So if you're looking for a date to pencil in, it would probably be Monday the 24th or Thursday the 27th are the most likely candidates.
You're trying for hybrid, is that what you mentioned, Dan?
I'm not seeing any holiday conflicts for either of those.
No, you said hybrid meeting. Is that what you're trying to do?
The idea for this is to try and make it a hybrid so that people can join on Zoom and or in person. And there are some spaces in town that have the technology for that.
I think it's a great idea. I think you get a lot more done, I think.
More importantly than even getting things done is to get feedback. So when people want to give feedback to the committee, by all means, we're open, accessible, and try to make it so that people can give feedback, and that way people can be heard. This is something that is generational in nature, is what we're doing with this recodification, and we want to make sure that we get it as close to right as we can, while having as minimal negative impact on the town. So there's going to be certainly a lot of different types of changes, and this is one where the feedback will be very helpful. Again, the section 6.3, which is performance standards, is one that I will plan to request people give feedback on, because that is all new. Whereas a lot of other components have minor language, that section really is new, and it's not required. It's not as if there's a legal requirement to put it in, but the idea of having direction, I think, becomes very helpful for both town and for those who want to use the land in more creative ways. Because we are seeing some creative ideas, and with creativity can come great things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We can just, to use what Ann said earlier, sometimes we just have to park the ideas. And in other cases, as Mr. McGrail pointed out a couple of weeks ago, you'd end up with a park. One way or the other. It all comes back to parking. Sorry, bad humor. So any other thoughts? So, and among the things that Attorney Bobrowski really wanted to get thoughts on is if we wanted to have a subcommittee, and we do have one available, that is very land use centric, that includes members of the planning board and zoning board of appeals, to go over specific sections. We can. My initial thinking on it is that unless the committee feels strongly, I prefer to actually have the committee overall review the content of the entirety of the draft. I think we have enough time between now and the ideal presentation next May to review things in depth. So that's my 2 cents, but this is a committee decision. So if anyone has thoughts on this, and Ms. Calvert is someone who's joined on from a member of the public, you are welcome to contribute as well. So we are a very collaborative group here. So, yes.
Yeah, I joined late, so I'm just trying to catch up. So I'm just listening tonight.
That perfectly acceptable. And we're happy to have your input, happy to have you as a part of the group itself. Anytime that people can join the decision-making bodies in the town, the overall town benefits, because we all have to live here in community.
Right.
Hopefully we live here in peaceful community.
That's the hope.
Some days seem to be more successful than that than others.
Yeah.
But that's the intent. So really, getting feedback is certainly welcome. So other people have thoughts. If there's a desire to delegate information, we can. If there is a desire to not delegate it, we can make sure that we don't. So otherwise, our next meeting is scheduled for June 3rd, 2 weeks from tonight. I have the expectation that everyone will have understood all 155 pages of text in draft 2. Just kidding. I do encourage people to read it. It's very dense. If you need to fall asleep, start reading zoning. It'll put you straight to sleep. The people on ZBA are used to reading it. I don't know how they survive those meetings having to go through zoning, but I wish, Joe, you and your colleagues all the best in doing that. Hopefully this will make things a lot easier when it's all said and done. And
we only concentrate in certain sections, so
well, those sections are all going to be renumbered, so things will get
well, that'll make it interesting now.
It will. So amongst the different elements here that's significant is to really take a look at the differences. Again, focusing on the new sections. Most of this is just renumbering, but the new sections and where there are substantive changes really gets down to the performance standards, which in short is what are the expectations for things that are built. And we don't have to include everything that's there. We can include items that aren't there. But this is the expectations, and where zoning typically requires a 2/3 vote to change, once this gets codified, it will be moderately challenging to change. One of the other items that I'm encouraging people to think about is signage. Right now we have two segments to the signage bylaws. And I'm not confident, based upon the discussions that I've heard from the economic development side and others, that we necessarily need two distinct signage bylaws, signage sections. So the idea was to have more restrictive segmentation, particularly in the downtown district. I'm not sure that has achieved its goal in a way that justifies the complexity it creates for everyone. So that's where just presenting that, the people who had really requested that are no longer pushing that committee. That committee no longer has members on it. So it's something that we have the ability to consolidate it down, in which case to figure out what elements are important becomes very, very significant, because we may find that where there's duplicity, do we want to just remove redundancy, or do we want to make things townwide? Because that could actually make some parts of the signage more restrictive or less restrictive, depending upon where components are. And just as you're reading through that, really consider what is the goal to make the best usage of the town's aesthetics, because signage really serves two functions. One is to inform, and two is the aesthetic component. And it's something that the current componentry is it's unwieldy to try and understand. And I know Attorney Bobrowski recommends simplifying it. I think personally that's a good idea. Just figuring out what that simplification should look like isn't super clear yet. So as things go forward, please take notes. For the members, you are welcome to send any feedback that you have to Attorney Bobrowski. Please CC me just so that I can consolidate it for organizational purposes. And that way, when we have a discussion, we can do it in a more organized fashion. So that's my suggestion, as you have different pieces of it. But otherwise, it sounds like we will reconvene and pick things up with June 3rd. And then we'll have a meeting the last week of June. So we will not be meeting on June 17th. So any questions, thoughts? And then we will figure out what tasks we want to try and accomplish over the summer. While we don't have to have meetings over the summer, I would encourage us to try and get more of the administrative work done if we can. May only be 1 or 2 meetings over the summer, but it's a good opportunity to work with Attorney Bobrowski and get other pieces cleaned up. Further thoughts? Okay, with that, several of the upcoming holidays and observances, much thanks to time and date. National Missing Children's Day is on May 25th. Something just to be aware of. The trafficking is unfortunately something that does happen. Children do go missing, and this is something we used to see it often on milk containers, but pay attention when you see the signage, whether it's at the library, police station, any of the public safety buildings, you see it come across any of the newer technologies. It really does work to reunite families. It's significant. So National Missing Children's Day. Lag BaOmer is a Jewish holiday as part of the middle of the 7 weeks between Shavuot and Passover. It's a day for those who may not be familiar with it, when different things can occur that are otherwise typically not done during that 7-week period. So it's an interesting day of celebration. Trinity Sunday is on May 26th. Memorial Day is next Monday on May 27th. There looks to be some fantastic programming in town to really honor the veterans who died and really celebrate Memorial Day in a really dignified manner. So I highly encourage people to celebrate the holiday in a significant way. And as we're probably aware of, there will be flags flying on Memorial Day and every other day as well. And then Corpus Christi, which is not the city, but actually the holiday, the Christian holidays on May 30th. So I try to put in different holidays between the meetings. That's where those come from. A little bit of education and culture and things that you probably never expected to get from this committee, but one never knows. Always becomes a positive thing. Any other feedback before we adjourn? Okay, with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Ann moves. Tim, is that a second?
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to give that one to Catherine because she jumped on it. She wants to get out of here. So Ann makes the motion. Catherine seconds. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Going once, going twice. Okay, with that, I'm going to call on you in the order in which you are on my screen. Ann.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Now your feedback gets carried. Joe.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Catherine.
Yes.
Eric. If you're able to unmute or if you're able to raise your hand to otherwise indicate your vote. Right now you're muted. I'm going to send a request. I'm not sure that Eric has connectivity of audio at the moment. Okay, so we'll consider Eric an abstention due to technical limitations. I'm in favor. So with that, the meeting will be adjourned at 8 o'clock. So thank you, everyone. And for those from the public that have joined us, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Hope to see you all at the meeting on June 3rd, 7 p.m. That one will be a Zoom meeting. And I will, as soon as I have a location and date for June 24th or June 27th, I have to coordinate with Attorney Bobrowski as well on that. I will go ahead and have that, send that information, have that posted as early as possible. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.